Compost basically improves with age. The older it gets, the more fine it gets. How many of you here already do composting of some kind? Great, so a lot of you are already composting, that's good. Well, I'm going to pass around a sample of compost for you all to look at, in case you haven't seen it. And this is compost that's been made passively. I don't turn my compost. I don't do anything to my compost except add stuff to it and make sure it stays damp. The key to composting successfully is, or one of the keys, well, the key really is, and this is on one of your handouts. On this side it's got the basic steps. And on the back side it's got who does the work of composting, which is this food web of decomposer organisms. It includes bacteria and fungi and earthworms and millipedes and snails and slugs and sow bugs and all these little creatures that specialize in eating up your organic waste and converting it into compost. So three of the things they need are food, oxygen, they breathe air like we do, and moisture, especially the bacteria. If the bacteria dry out, they'll just go dormant and they'll sit there and nothing will happen to your compost pile. It won't break down. But it's really easy to bring it back to life. You just add water. And the compost, the bacteria and the earthworms, they like the environment to be about 50% moisture, which if you have a leaf pile and you can hear the leaves rustling in your pile, then it's too dry. So the trick for leaves is to make it so you can't hear them rustling, and then they'll be damp. A lot of people think that oak leaves won't decompose, and that may be based on their experience, because if they dry out, they actually won't decompose. I've had them in here for about a long time, 20 years maybe. Nothing's happened. I'll just pass that around. That's the before sample. That's the before sample. You can even look at one of these leaves and see it starting to decompose. These are last fall's leaves without me having done anything to them except keep them damp. Actually, what I did is I put them in the pile when they were damp. So this is a great weekend to start a compost pile because it's going to rain. You want to gather the leaves when they're damp. I'll pass this around. This is like the intermediate phase. And then after a year to 2 years, depending on how much effort you put into it, this is the finished product. And compost does a lot of beneficial things for the soil. I like to say that, I think it's great to promote composting from a waste reduction perspective. That's a great benefit. But when it comes to gardening and plants, compost is more like it's like miraculous. You can't get anything that does what compost will do for your soil. And there's a handout on that, and it has a synergistic effect too. So there's a handout that talks about all the benefits, like it adds organic matter, which is that brown stuff that's going around, and that improves, not only does it add nutrients, it improves soil structure, and it helps the soil hold water and nutrients, and it provides nutrients, and the nutrients that it provides are continuously released on a slow time frame, which is just how the plants like it. So you won't get pollution from too much nutrients running off. It just comes out a little at a time. The plants suck it up, and that's how nature made it. It's a very good system that nature created. It increases biodiversity because when in that little tub of brown stuff, there's probably a bazillion bacteria. That's a technical term, bazillion. And I say there's 1 million bacteria in 1 tablespoon of good soil. And the nice thing about the bacteria is not only do they help decompose the food waste or other material, but they help your plants. And I assume you may have heard about that in the talk this morning. Maybe you didn't. But the bacteria and other organisms in the soil perform a zillion benefits for your roots of your plants. And they make them stronger, and that's the reason why you don't need to use pesticides and herbicides or even fertilizers as much, or if at all. Because when you have these beneficial organisms in your soil is alive. And that gives a whole bunch of protections and health benefits to the plants growing in it that would take a whole semester or 2 of microbiology to really go into all the details. But just all you need to know is they provide nutrients, they fight off diseases, they keep each other in check so none of the bad guys can take over. They're about 97% of the soil organisms are beneficial or neutral, meaning they don't harm your plants. So there may be a few percent that are pests, like slugs, eat your hostas and so forth. So just throw those back in the compost pile where they can do their good work. But most of the time you don't have to worry about bacteria or soil organisms impacting your yard and garden in a negative way, especially if you have more biodiversity. The more in there, the more they'll keep each other in check. And it also buffers the soil, which means that most plants grow in a pH or prefer a pH, the acidity of the soil. They like it to be neutral, which is number 7. And compost is number 7. By the time it goes through its process of decomposition, it may go through an acidic phase, but by the end, by some miracle of nature and microbiology, it comes out at a pH 7. So it's like all-purpose, help your soil to have a good pH. So those are the main key things, but then the value is all these things are happening at the same time and they add to each other. So that's why I think it seems like a miracle. It's not really a miracle, it's all science-based, but I like to say that because it makes it sound more interesting. But so anyway, the benefits of using compost from a gardening or a landscaping perspective are even more than from a waste reduction, in my opinion. So I wanted to talk about the basics of composting, and I brought a DVD program, a video program, with me that I'm going to show, which covers all the basics of how to compost. And then after that, I'll take your individual questions that you may have. And I also brought a worm bin. I suppose most of you don't know that when you came up to take out handouts, did anybody notice there was a little composting bin in here already? If you don't know, you can compost indoors, and it doesn't smell, and it doesn't have any negative impacts, and you can put your food scraps in this little bin, which I've drilled holes in for air, and there's some red wiggler earthworms in here that are decomposing as we speak. And they're the easiest pets to keep. You really don't have to do much. They like to eat paper, so if you have paper plates or paper towels, that's what you can use for bedding. And then you can bury your food scraps in there, and as long as you keep it damp, like I said, they like that nice moisture, they will just quietly eat away, and over time, after about 6 months to a year, your bin will be about half full with this beautiful black compost. I brought a sample of worm compost. This one is the worm compost. It looks similar to the other compost I sent around, but it's a little bit wetter because they like that moisture. So that's it's also called worm castings. And you can buy it for a lot of money in little bags or make your own. So if anybody wants to try worm composting, I brought some plastic bags, and I will be happy to share some worms with you at the end of the session. You can take them home, make your own worm bin out of your favorite Rubbermaid or whatever container. Just drill holes in the sides, and that's really all you need to do. And you can either keep it in your house, in your kitchen, under a counter, or in a closet, or in your basement, or in a garage. It just needs to be kept between 40 degrees and 80 degrees Fahrenheit. So it can't go below freezing or they will freeze. But other than that, you can put it pretty much wherever you want. And I keep mine on the floor in my kitchen under a counter, and it doesn't smell because if there are any odors, because occasionally you might get an earthy smell or a garlic smell if you put garlic in there. But as long as it's down there, it's far enough away that it's not reaching the level where you can smell it. But I do that for sheer convenience because I really do like it to be as easy as possible. So it can be done, but if you don't want them in your living space, you can put them in the garage or whatever. So all right, I'm going to start this, I hope.
I'm going to pass around the sign-in sheet. We're just trying to keep track of numbers mostly.
And if you are interested in promoting home composting, if you can put your contact information down, I'll be able to get in touch with you.
And there's also an order form here if you want to order one of these.
Oh yeah, the compost bins are for sale. They're $43, which is cost. That's basically the amount that they cost at the when you buy them when the town buys them. Wellesley bought 20 of these and they paid $43 each. And I'll explain the composter. It's a nice bin. It's pretty small though, so you might want to get 2. And you might want to drill holes in the cover so the rain can get in, or leave the cover off when it rains so that more water can get in, because solid covers are not the best. So in terms of moisture being able to get back in. So just keep that in mind. But other than that, and also when you set up your bin or your pile, put it within reach of your hose, so that if it does dry out, you can add water. And that's the key thing. It doesn't matter if it's in the sun or the shade. You just want it to be conveniently located for you to use it easily and within reach of your hose. And then you're good. If you put it in your garden, that's even better, because then it'll be handy to where you're probably going to be using the compost.
Do we put the shades down? There's a lot of glare on this screen.
Yes. Do we know how to do this? Is it just by chain? And this video is available online as well. If you want to watch it later, there's a link to it on this handout.
Composting is our way of smoothing and enhancing Mother Nature's decomposition process. On the forest floor, it may take several years before leaves are transformed by naturally occurring organisms into rich organic soil. But by composting, you can create conditions under which these organisms will flourish, turning your yard and kitchen waste into a free, beneficial soil amendment for your garden, lawn, and potted plants in a matter of months. Home composting is less expensive and more efficient than transferring organic waste to an incinerator, landfill, or even a centralized composting facility. It is environmentally sound, can be done almost anywhere, and enables householders to substantially reduce their trash. This program explains the basics of how to recycle your yard and kitchen waste through home composting, describes how to use your yard waste as mulch, and explains the importance of leaving grass clippings on the lawn. Home composting is not difficult or time-consuming. Most of the work is done by soil organisms, bacteria, molds, fungi, beetles, centipedes, insects, and earthworms are just some of the organisms which work together to decompose or recycle organic materials into humus. Like us, they need food, oxygen, and water for survival. Food for the microbes is your yard waste and kitchen scraps. These contain carbon for energy and nitrogen for growth and reproduction. Dry, woody things like dead autumn leaves, straw, paper, and sawdust are high in carbon. Fresh, moist materials like grass clippings, vegetable scraps, garden waste, coffee grounds, and manures are good sources of nitrogen. Composting a diverse mix of materials generally results in a good balance of carbon and nitrogen. Oxygen must be available for aerobic organisms to thrive. Oxygen can be supplied by periodically turning or mixing the pile with a pitchfork, or by poking holes in it with a broom handle or special aeration tool. Aeration keeps the compost pile from developing unpleasant odors. Water is essential. With too little water, the organisms will slow down and can die. Too much water will eliminate oxygen, and odors may result. The material in the pile should be kept as damp as a wrung-out sponge. Countless things can be composted at home. Citrus rinds, vegetable stalks and peelings, spoiled fruit and vegetables, coffee grounds, coffee filters and tea bags, eggshells, peanut shells, straw, weeds, garden waste, and paper towels, to name a few. But not everything belongs in the compost pile. Do not add meat or fish scraps, bones, fats, grease, oil, peanut butter, or dairy products such as milk, cheese, butter, mayonnaise, and yogurt. These foods can attract pests or cause odors. Do not add diseased plants. weeds that have gone to seed, or the roots of invasive plants such as quackgrass, loud morning glory, and bittersweet, which may survive the composting process and take root where the finished compost is used. Dog and cat waste can carry parasites transmittable to humans and should not be added to the pile. Using a compost bin to contain your organic materials may be preferable to an open compost pile because it discourages animals, makes the pile easier to manage, helps retain heat and moisture, and tends to look neater. There are many kinds of ready-made bins available through garden centers, department stores, and other retail outlets. Some are small and designed specifically for kitchen waste. These are referred to as digesters. Others are large enough to accommodate both yard and kitchen waste. With little expense and effort, you can build your own bin using scrap lumber, fencing, cinder blocks, pallets, or a combination of materials. A bin must be at least 3 feet wide, 3 feet long, and 3 feet high to provide enough mass to retain the heat generated by the microbes. It shouldn't be bigger than 5 feet in any dimension for ease of handling and to prevent compaction. The bin usually has an open base, which provides drainage and allows the composting materials to come in contact with natural soil organisms. A top is optional. Making sure that only the appropriate food scraps are added to the pile is the best method for keeping animals out of your compost. However, animal-proof bins can be purchased commercially or made by drilling quarter-inch holes in the sides, bottom, and top of a trash can with a tight locking lid. A wooden bin can be animal-proofed by lining it with half-inch metal mesh and securing the top. How fast composting takes place depends on the kinds of materials you add to the pile and the amount of time you're willing to dedicate to composting. The art of composting is simply balancing certain factors, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, and moisture, to convert organic items into a rich humus within the time frame you have chosen. If you have little time to spend on composting and there's no hurry for a finished compost, you may want to try the passive method, using a holding bin. It is one of the easiest ways to compost, since no labor is required other than placing wastes in a bin and harvesting the compost from the bottom of the pile about 8 to 12 months later. If you have a large volume of organic wastes or want finished compost sooner, the active method may be more appropriate, using a turning unit. Turning units typically consist of a series of bins or a rotating barrel. This is an active method because the pile is periodically turned or moved into the next bin, which supplies oxygen to the organisms, allowing them to break down the wastes quickly. Weekly aeration can result in finished compost in less than 2 months. Whichever method you choose, passive or active, the recipe for creating a compost pile is the same. Start by placing your bin in a convenient location with good drainage. It can be in the sun or shade. Gather some materials to be composted, keeping in mind diversity, texture, carbon, and nitrogen. Chopping or shredding the material will help speed up the composting process. Put a layer of dry, woody, high-carbon materials, such as leaves, straw, or sawdust from untreated wood, in the bottom of the bin. Sprinkle with water to dampen the materials to the consistency of a wrung-out sponge. Then add a layer of moist, nitrogen-rich materials, such as grass clippings, garden spoils, and cow or horse manure. The thickness of the layers isn't critical, but no layer should be more than 6 inches deep. Mix the 2 layers together. A shovelful of soil or finished compost every so often will add even more organisms to the pile. Continue alternating, mixing, and watering the layers as materials become available, or until the bin is full. Don't be surprised if the compost pile is warm on the inside within a few days. Heat is a normal byproduct of composting and indicates that the microorganisms are working to break down the materials. Over time, the volume of material in the bin will shrink, Appropriate kitchen scraps can be added as they become available and should be buried in the center of the pile. Keep a container on the counter while preparing meals to easily collect the kitchen scraps. The container of scraps may be covered and stored in the refrigerator or under the counter until it is emptied into the compost bin. You can continue to put food scraps, coffee grounds, houseplant cuttings, and other organic items into the pile throughout the year. The composting process will slow down during the winter months, but will speed up again when spring arrives. Leaves alone will compost, but it will take a bit longer than if they are mixed with grass clippings, manure, or other nitrogen-rich materials. Although not essential, shredding leaves with a rotary lawnmower or home shredder will accelerate the composting process and quickly reduce their volume when space for composting is limited. You'll know that your compost is ready to harvest when it is dark brown, crumbly, earthy smelling, and no longer resembles the original material. If you have used the passive method, the more finished compost will be found near the bottom of the pile. You may want to screen your compost to remove pieces of woody materials, eggshells, and other items that have not totally decomposed, and return them to the compost bin. Finished compost is referred to as black gold by experienced gardeners because they know how valuable it is. Compost restores life to soil by helping to retain moisture, improve texture, and reduce erosion. It provides plants with essential nutrients in a time-release fashion. Compost may be incorporated into your vegetable or flower gardens about 1 month before planting by applying a 3-inch layer of compost and mixing it thoroughly into the top 4 to 6 inches of soil. Compost can be used as a side dressing during the growing season and mixed into each transplant hole or seed furrow. To make a nutrient-rich potting soil, mix equal amounts of finished compost, soil, and sand. You can use screened compost as a lawn top dressing by spreading it uniformly on the surface to a depth of 1/8 to 1/4 inch. Composting is not the only way to reduce and recycle your yard waste. Shred your leaves and brush into a mulch to use around plants, trees, and shrubs or on slopes. Mulch reduces weed problems, adds nutrients to the soil, moderates soil temperature and moisture, and helps control erosion by protecting the soil surface. Woody mulches are best used in perennial gardens, under trees and shrubs, and as pathway material. Leaves and dried grass clippings are good mulches for annual vegetable and flower gardens. Leaves should be shredded and allowed to degrade slightly before being used. And dried grass clippings should be applied less than 1 inch thick to prevent matting. Mulching with grass clippings, which have been treated recently with herbicides, can harm your plants. As a precaution, mulch with clippings from treated lawns only after 2 lawn mowings. Grass clippings can account for up to 50% of your waste during the growing season. Don't bag and dispose of your grass clippings. If they are not composted or used as mulch, leave them on the lawn where they can help improve the soil. Each bag of grass clippings is equivalent to 1/4 pound of usable nitrogen. During dry spells, clippings left on the lawn help retain moisture in the soil. You can conserve water, reduce the amount of money you spend on fertilizers and garbage bags, and save lots of your own time and energy by recycling grass clippings back into the lawn. To maintain your lawn properly, cut your lawn when it is dry. Mow when it is 3 to 4 inches tall, and never cut it shorter than 2 inches. Use a sharp mower blade and avoid over-fertilizing your lawn. Turf experts agree that clippings do not contribute to thatch. The fact is, grass clippings are almost 80% moisture and decompose quickly. As you have seen, helping to reduce, reuse, and recycle our yard and kitchen wastes is easy and can be very rewarding. Whether you are motivated by having the best garden in the neighborhood, improving our environment, or saving money, home composting, mulching, and leaving grass clippings on the lawn are the smart things to do.
So that was actually a threefer. Not a twofer, a threefer, because it talked about composting and also about shredding up your sticks and how to take care of your lawn. So it's all about using all that organic material on site, and you'll reap a lot of benefits. So let's see if you have any questions. Anybody have any questions? Yep.
So I have the rotating bins as well as a digester, yes. And
A digester, you mean is
the
it
one
called a
that's,
green cone?
yeah, it's set into the ground.
Uh-huh.
So it seems like how do you know so that'll balance out pH even if you tend to have a limited array of products going into it?
Oh, I see what you're saying. If you are putting just certain things into a pile, how do you know it'll still be okay?
Yeah, for instance, it's mostly vegetables and coffee grounds. Does it need, leaves and grass
I would
clippings?
say no. If you're putting in a mixture of vegetable materials and coffee grounds, the pH should be fine.
And if there's an odor, does that mean it's too moist?
Nope, that means, well, it could be, but it's probably too much nitrogen.
Okay.
That's why we came up with this handy dandy recipe. This video predated our recipe.
All right.
Because we say a diversity of materials in the video, but that doesn't really tell you what that means. So to avoid odors, you want about 3 parts browns to 1 part greens. So the greens are, and that's shorthand for high carbon for the browns or high nitrogen for the greens. So, and it talks about what's in these categories. The browns includes leaves, straw, hay, shredded paper and cardboard, any kind of a tree product, chipped brush, sawdust, and pine needles, things like that. These are all, they're not all brown, but we call them brown to make it a little bit easier than to say high carbon. And then the greens include grass clippings, weeds, vegetable and fruit wastes, seaweed, eggshells, coffee grounds and tea bags, manure, herbivore manure like horse, cow, rabbit, chicken, goat, or gerbil. So what you said is you're putting in mostly vegetables and coffee grounds.
Yeah.
So that's all from the green category. So you need to add some browns. And have you noticed when you open your bin, a bunch of fruit flies comes up into your face? Maybe it's too cold. So
Yeah, I think it's too cold still.
But if that happens too, because that is a common occurrence in the case where you don't cover your food scraps with browns. I've had people, when they get one of these compost bins, it's great, and they think, oh, I can fit all my food scraps in there, and they put all their food scraps in there, and they don't realize they need some browns. And they open the lid and they're greeted by a cloud of fruit flies, which loves the fruit and stuff decomposing. They're not harmful. There's no diseases or anything you need to worry about. But if you just covered it with 6 inches of leaf litter or leafy material, or if you don't have leaves, you can use paper towels or ripped up newspaper. You can pick and choose from your mix and match from your browns, but you always want to bury the food scraps under the browns, and that basically acts like a carbon filter for odors. Because what happens is the nitrogen turns to ammonia, and that's a very pungent odor. And so that's usually the reason for odors. Also, it might be too wet, because when you have a lot of the green material, it usually is quite wet. Because it's high in moisture, usually the lettuce and things like that, coffee grounds, are already damp. And if you're not adding any browns in there, you're probably not adding anything that would dry it out. So just by adding some browns, add some soil. Also, soil is a really good odor cutter. It'll filter out any odor. So if you do get a stinky situation, cover it with soil, or try to fix the problem. If it's too much greens, add some browns. And then if it still smells, put a layer of 1 inch of soil over the top, and then just kill the odor. And then it'll compost underneath. and you won't smell it while it's composting, and then over time you'll be able to get your compost out from the bottom. So that's a great question. Thank you for asking me about, the recipe, because I didn't really mention it, but it's really easy, and also the easiest way I find to get that ratio without having to oh, where's my leaves? Oh, where's my paper? I just want to dump my food waste and go back to what I was doing. Is to fill your pile, whether you have a wire mesh pile or one of these, fill it up 3/4 of the way with damp leaves. If they're dry, they'll just sit there and nothing will happen. We've referred to this as a leaf preserver, this composter, because that has happened. If you fill it up with leaves and put the cover on, they will be well preserved forever until you add water. So fill it up with damp leaves, add some dirt at the same time. That'll add your workforce. This is your labor force, and they work for free. You just have to put them in. When you start, once you get going, they'll multiply, and you don't have to keep doing that. But every time you empty your compost bin, leave a couple inches of compost in the bottom. That's your fresh sourdough starter for the fresh stuff. So anyway, fill it up with your damp leaves with some soil mixed in, and not potting soil, because that's mostly sterile. You want dirt from the ground, from your garden, or compost. And then for the next 6 months, all you have to do is you get a tool such as this, or this is like a cultivator or a short-handled hoe, something that you can reach in there and dig a hole. And just dig a 6-inch hole, dump in your food scraps and cover it back over, and next time you come out, it'll be gone. And then you do it again, and that's easy. You don't have to measure. But if you run out of leaves, it's a good idea. This time of year, it may be hard to get leaves. You may have already cleaned them all up. And if you don't, I keep a leaf pile around. So think about that in the future for a source of browns. Put a leaf pile, because you don't need a bin for leaves. You don't need to contain them. The main reason for a bin is to keep animals out, and they're usually not really going to be going into your leaf pile. So just make a little leaf pile in an out-of-the-way spot in your yard, and you'll always have a source of browns. And the leaf pile will compost on its own in the course of about a year, and it makes beautiful compost as well. And that way you don't have to bag your leaves and ship them away and all that, so you can get creative. Yeah?
So I've been piling leaves in one area of my yard for years and years. I've never done anything. So will that be good soil that's there?
Yeah, like I said, the older the better.
Should I do anything to it? Should I water it or anything like that?
Well, what I would do is I would take a hoe. When you're digging into a pile, a hoe is the easiest thing. Pitchfork might be too if you have it, but just dig into that and peel back the top layer and dig down and see what it looks like underneath. Because I bet you 10 to 1 that after the top foot or so, or however many leaves you put on last year, under that layer, you probably have a beautiful pile of what looks like soil. And you don't have to do anything to it. You just go in there with your shovel and put it in your wheelbarrow and take it away. You have 20 years worth of compost ready to go. And what I do with compost is 2 things, because if you have a bin like this, it shrinks down by 75%. And so you don't get a lot, really, for the amount you put in. So if you fill this bin up in a year, you're going to get a wheelbarrow full of compost. And you're like, wait, that's just one little 3-foot section of my vegetable garden. Now what? So what I do to conserve it, and kind of if I have a limited supply of you can buy or get compost. The towns often, does Wellesley give compost? And it's usually pretty good quality too, so you can get more. But if you have a limited supply and you don't feel like going and getting more, and it's kind of my insurance policy for plants. Whenever I'm planting something, I get a handful or a small bucket of compost from one of my piles. I have multiple piles, because the easiest way to manage compost is to have a fresh one that you're adding to, a medium one that's just kind of sitting there and composting, and then either that one or another one is the old pile that's just already shrunken down, and you just, when you need compost, you go shovel it out. So that way you don't have to be digging down and getting under your rotting banana peels to get to the stuff at the bottom. Although this little bin has a little door at the bottom because when they designed it, they thought, oh, that's where the compost is going to be ready, so I'll get it out of there. Let me just warn you, when you start using this door dries stuff out because it's got a little shelf. It's almost impossible to get whatever's in there damp. So don't be fooled if you've been using this bin for a year. You open the door and you see a wall of dried up leaves. Just take your trowel and dig in there, and there's probably going to be compost underneath. But you can get out a handful or two, or shovelful or two at a time. The easiest way to harvest the bin all at once is to pull it up off the pile. That's going to be easier than trying to dig through that little hole. But if you just need a little at a time, like I was saying, when I am planting something, I want compost, and I put the compost in the planting hole. So for whatever it is, if it's a tomato plant, I dig a little hole, and I put a handful of compost in the hole, put water in, put the seedling in, and that thing will live. It's like a guarantee. Not always, but most of the time. So by using your compost where the roots are, they will get the benefits right away. And then if you have extra compost, you can spread it around. But that's what I do, is like whatever I'm planting, I make sure I put at least a handful. You don't need a lot because it's got a lot of these microbes, even in a small amount. So it's not like you need tons of it. You just, a little bit goes a long way, which is great. And that's what I find. And then if you want to improve your soil, you can mix it into your vegetable garden bed. But if you don't have enough, just put it where you're planting.
Just real quick about that,
Yep.
that 3-bin method that you were talking about. So, so you have the active one, and then how do you decide when to sort of convert it into the medium active? So the medium active one, you're just not doing anything, really just letting it sit.
Yeah.
And then how do you know when it's like down to the third?
Yeah. Well, what you would do is you would, like that, I would put that on like a 2 or a 3 year cycle.
Okay.
So I'd fill my bin up for a year, and then it's all full and it's not composted yet. So then I would start my second bin.
And just let
That's,
it sit. Okay.
yeah, and so then I fill up this one, and then this one's not quite ready yet, so then I start a third one. By the time 6 months have gone by and I filled up this one, guess what? That first one is all composted, it's all
And are you adding water to all the other two too as you go along, or you don't, once you
You
stop
do-
adding stuff?
You do want to make sure it doesn't dry out, especially in the summer when it if it doesn't rain at all. You
So
do
that's
want
really the only thing you really do with the ones
Right.
that are non-active is just keep sure you're adding water.
exactly, yeah.
And then just, again, you said it and I forget, the ratio, because I have a ton of leaves in the backyard that I put into the woods. I hope that's not hurting the trees or anything.
If they're not too deep, you don't
Yeah.
want to put them deeper
Yeah,
than
okay.
a foot.
Okay, like, try to keep
You
them
spread
around the
'em around.
root of the wood, of the tree, but yeah, okay. And then.
And
so-
not up against the bark. You don't
Right.
want to put leaves or mulch right up against the bark of your.
So I have a lot of leaves, so I can just fill, and you were saying how much the leaves, 2/3 to 1/3?
Oh, for leaves you can do 100%.
Oh, okay, all right,
Yeah,
okay.
leaves you can do by themselves. Greens you can't do by themselves,
Okay,
or
so-
you'll get
okay.
odors.
But if I am doing greens too, I wanna make sure the leaves are at least 2/3 and then the greens are 1/3 or something.
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
Okay, all right, thanks.
So when you add the 3 parts brown, 1 part of green, do you need to layer them, like for every 12 inch, then you start a new?
She asked if you need to layer the browns and greens and 12 inch of it. No,
So
just
you
do it
can
however
add
you have
as
it.
much as you can, and then, okay.
Yeah, just the main thing is make sure you put leaves on top of your food waste. If you're not adding to a leaf pile where you can just bury it, and you're putting in your food waste and there's nothing else in there, you always want to end with leaves on the top rather than food waste exposed. Because if you have the food waste exposed, you're more likely to get odors. So if you just think about, okay, I'll dump in my food scraps and then I'll cover it with a handful of leaves, and you should be fine. You don't have to worry about the layers or mixing it. It's kind of, it'll work no matter how you do it. Yeah?
I have a rotating composter. How do I get worms and all those?
Add some soil to it. Just take a handful of soil or two, or shovel full of dirt from your garden. And if you see any worms in the yard, put them in there, and they'll probably be happy as a clam.
And it doesn't get too hot in there for them.
It shouldn't. And if it does, they can usually find a cooler spot within the barrel. So, yeah. And they might freeze in the winter, and then you can just start over again the next year. Yeah.
I just started indoor worm composting
Oh, good for
with the rotating trays.
Oh, yeah.
It's been like 2 weeks, and it just seems to keep drying out.
Yes,
There's
I
no
had.
instructions on how you should add water, and I just thought, how do you? And then
Yeah.
it's also like a little spigot
Spigot.
at the bottom to let the leachate out, and I opened it, I was like ready for, and nothing came out.
Yes, I tried one of those because we have the multi-tray system. This is the $7 version that you just drill holes in. And I keep the bottom solid, and then I maintain the moisture just by eyeball. If it gets too wet, I add more paper. If it's too dry, I sprinkle it with water. With the multi-tray system, there,
I mean, I'm
I
just in
found-
one tray now, so.
Right.
Yeah.
I just what I do is I take it takes too long with a spray bottle, to tell you the truth. It just your hand wears right out. So I take a jug of water, like a soda bottle. I fill it with water, and I put my finger over the top and I sprinkle it on like that, and let it run out the spigot. And because I have the same exact thing, I'm trying it, and it dries out every week. You need to add water every week.
Yeah, and that's not in the instructions at all, so.
I know.
And then
Oops.
you just mix all the bedding and the food that you're putting in all together?
Yeah, what I do with those is I put the bedding in, I always add paper, and I try to put paper on the top. So I bury the food scraps under the paper and cover it back over. And you can keep adding paper. What I found with that was I never kept adding trays because the first tray was never done because it kept drying out.
Yeah.
So eventually I did add, I think I added the second tray, and the bottom tray is composted, but the top tray is still dry. So the worms aren't crawling up like they're supposed to. They're supposed to crawl up to get the fresh stuff, but they stay down there where it's all mucky and wet. So
So it didn't work that well for you?
it doesn't work. I think this is kind of, well, you can make it work. Just add water.
I just have to water it all the
But
time.
if you're wondering whether to get a super duper fancy layered one, they're not, the worms have not read the instructions. They don't climb up when they're supposed to. So, and then the spigot on I have one at home too, I've tried all different kinds. My one at home, the spigot on the bottom was clogged, I think with either castings or worms. Now, but there's compost in there, I just have to pull the whole thing outside and do it outside, because when I pull those layers apart, I know it's gonna make a mess, so.
Yeah.
So with this kind, when you want to get the compost out, I'll just quickly explain. You wait until it's about halfway full with the brown composting material, and then you add your food scraps mostly just to one side for about a month's time. And during that time, the worms will tend to crawl over to get to the food, and then your other side, you take off the top layer and then agitate the top under a bright light, because the worms don't like light. And they'll crawl down to get away, and then I put rubber gloves on, or latex gloves, and I pick up a pile of compost. If there's any worms, I toss them back in, and then I put the compost in a bucket. And it takes about an hour, and I'm done with most of it, and it's kind of meditative. You get up close and personal with your worms. And then you just keep going. The worms won't overpopulate. People wonder, will there be too many? They don't overpopulate. They just grow to their size of their container. And then if you get more, you can just give them to a friend and they can start.
Would you ever put them in an outdoor compost pile?
You could put them in an outdoor compost pile. If it's big enough in the wintertime, it will have enough mass that they'll live. They'll be able to live in there. They're not native, and there's some people that say, oh, don't release these unnative worms, but guess what? They're already here, so it's not going to hurt to add more. The pilgrims brought them over, and they've naturalized. So you can find them in the leaf litter. I'll pass around a sample of these worms so you can see. They're called red wigglers. They're European in descent, like most of us, or some of us. And they do good things for the most part. There's talk that you wouldn't want to introduce them to a natural area where they may not already exist, because they might alter the soil ecology more than it should be for that area. So, but anywhere that humans have been, in Massachusetts anyway, these worms are already here.
And
So-
regular earthworms don't work.
Well, these are a variety of regular earthworms. They're all on a spectrum. The red wigglers are smaller and reddish, and you might find them in your garden or under the leaf litter. So I would call those earthworms also. But the red wigglers, the small red wiggler ones, thrive and need a rich environment, rich organic material. So that's where you might find them in a manure pile or a compost pile. They love compost piles. Whereas the bigger earthworms and night crawlers like to go deeper down into the soil. So they're not as happy in a confined space. And also the red wigglers can handle hotter temperatures, which you get when you have decomposing matter. So that's why I use those. But they're also beneficial in the garden. So, you know, you may have them. They, like I said, they've already kind of naturalized. If you have horses, you can find them in the manure pile usually too.
But like, do you need them for that? Do you need the specific red wigglers to use that for?
Oh, for an outdoor bin? No, you don't need
Okay,
specific
okay.
ones. And this bin
It's
actually
really
comes
nice.
with a floor that's like a plastic mesh floor to try to keep animals out. And the worms should be able to crawl up through
Oh,
that.
okay, so it doesn't really have a floor other than just the mesh, so, okay, oh,
Yeah.
that's good, yeah.
But if you do see any worms in the yard, you can always throw them in, and
Yeah.
it only takes 2, and they'll multiply.
Otherwise, just like throwing in some soil as a starter with the leaves should work. Okay.
Yeah, and a lot of times when you throw in soil, you get worms in there without even knowing it.
Right, that's what I mean,
Will it decompose faster if you mix it?
It'll decompose faster if you chop things up.
Okay.
And if you mix it, it might decompose faster because it might break up if things clump together, they might sit there. So it's kind of, I call turning as either or. If you have a small bin like that, the air is going to be able to get into it for the most part. But if you stir it once in a while, it'll help break things up. So yeah, it should speed it up.
So the
But
stirring,
you don't have to. It's optional.
sorry to interrupt you, but the stirring is more not to really integrate the greens and the browns per se, but to get the air in and to keep things chopped up more or something.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, the stirring isn't to necessarily mix the browns and the greens, although that won't hurt. That will help as well. But it's to introduce more air and also to give you an opportunity to see if you have any dry pockets.
So you have to have it on the ground, you can't have it like in the garage or on another?
The earth machine,
Yeah.
You could do it in the garage. You would just want to put a piece of plastic under it so if it gets wet, it doesn't get your floor dirty. But it has no real floor, so it might become a
So when you
mess.
said that about the earthworms coming up, that led me to believe you needed to have it on the ground.
Oh,
So-
yeah. If you want earthworms to crawl up from the ground, then you need to have it on the ground.
But you can keep it another place, it will work in another,
Yeah,
on another.
yeah. You just may need to introduce those
Right.
critters.
Okay.
So what does the bottom of that look like?
Well, I don't have the actual floor, so right now there's no floor. But if you just picture a circle with like cross, like lattice, that's what it looks like. So mice and rats can't get through the holes, but the worms can. But it's not solid, so if you're gonna do it on indoors of some kind, then you need to just be prepared to keep the compost contained. Yeah?
I have a question. If I get a bin of that sort and I put it in my basement and I put all kinds of leaves and then the food waste in there, how do the worms get in there? If I'm just putting it
You
in my
need to either
basement?
buy them, I mean, you might not have been here in the beginning, I'll give you some if you want, you need to introduce them. So, you can get some from me or from a friend, or order them, you can order them online, and there's a handout up here too on worm composting. So if you want to do this, I suggest that you take this handout, it's pretty simple, and it's pretty similar to the other type of composting.
Or are you saying you can get it from regular soil, just shovel some?
Yeah, and you might be able to find some red wigglers outdoors, but it'll take longer for them to build up their population if you only start with a few. So multiple ways to get them in, but you have to add them somehow. Yeah?
Quick question about mulching. So I often use grass clippings just fresh out of I mow the lawn, collect them in the bag, and then use that as mulch. But he said in the video to use only dry grass for mulch. And can you comment on that? Is there some reason not to use only grass?
Sometimes if you use wet grass, it clumps up and it gets kind of rancid smelling. That's the only reason, really, is just if it smells. But if yours is coming out and it's fluffy enough and it's not compacting into a mat of green slime, then you're fine. That's the reason why they also said don't put it deeper than 3 inches for the same reason. If it's too deep, you'll get this hot layer of stinking grass clippings smell like cow manure, basically. But you haven't had that happen, it sounds like. So it's fine. What you're doing is good.
Thanks.
And if you're mulching with leaves, do they have to be chopped up, or is it?
No, if you're mulching with leaves, it's optional whether you chop them or not. And if you don't have a leaf shredder, you can run over them with a lawnmower and you can put the bagger on and they suck them up that way. Or you can use them whole. Maple leaves break down faster than oak leaves, so if you have those, it's fine. So it's really just a matter of appearance. If you don't chop them up, you'll just see them. And I don't mind it. I think it looks like a natural landscape, but some people might not like the way it looks. But it'll still break down, so you don't have to.
Okay, and it doesn't impact the pH or,
No, because it's happening at the top, at the surface of the soil. It'll be composting, and it'll be fine. And then up above it, it'll just not be. It'll be fine. It's kind of composting in place. So yeah.
Oh,
Oh, no, you can go ahead, we have one more question.
very quickly, my compost pile is in something that looks like that.
Okay.
And it's a really pathetic compost pile. It has too much straw in it.
That's not a problem.
You know, and
There's nothing the matter with too much browns. That's better than too much greens.
oh really? Okay.
Yeah.
And then I've been doing the wrong thing. I didn't even know. I would just throw my vegetables back there on the top, like.
That's fine.
But
That's
do
fine.
I have to? Should I turn it to get it go? It's like so. It's too dry.
Dense.
I think it's dense. It's so dense.
Mm-hmm.
So.
I would try to add water. I would just. It's been raining, so hopefully, and it's open, right? You don't have a
It's
cover on
open,
it.
but it is so old. I mean, it's been there so long. Like the sides, you almost can't see the grade. Like it just looks like a map.
It's grown in. Yeah,
It's
yeah.
grown in.
Yeah. So you probably have compost. You probably have what?
It's like an art installation.
It's like an
art
art installation. There's an insulation.
Are plants growing out of it?
Not yet.
Okay.
Because
If you have
straw.
plants growing out of your compost pile, that means it's composted and it's ready to be used.
Well, I
But if-
have in the past. I just kept throwing stuff over
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
All
So
right,
what
I'm
you
going
need
for
to do is like open it. You're ready to harvest your compost.
Might have to cut it open.
Yeah, cut it open, get in there, pull all the dry stuff off, set that aside, and you should have a nice muffin of compost in there. You can
Okay.
spread it in your garden and then start over.
I'm really excited now.
So Chip Osborne's starting downstairs in 3 minutes. So if you haven't gotten the materials, probably most of this is online, right?
Yeah, we sent it to people that registered.